Cruises have become increasingly expensive over the past few years, with recent reports suggesting that prices have increased a whopping 43% in the last 5 years. This well exceeds the rate of inflation over the same time period. And what makes things worse is that cruises are marketed as all-inclusive deals, but the cruise base fare plus taxes generally amounts to a small proportion of an overall trip's cost. Take my 7-night cruise to Alaska last year, where if you factor in mandatory cruise gratuities, spa fees, airfare, and onshore excursions, then the cruise base fare only amounts to a third of that total cost. In this video, I'll introduce you to a cruise industry secret called the repositioning cruise, which in my opinion is one of the most budget-friendly options in the industry.
Have you ever wondered whether cruise ships are occupied when they move to completely different parts of the world, typically with changing seasons?
For example, in the fall, many cruise ships head from Europe to warmer climates like Florida. Then in the spring, the ships reverse direction, traveling from Florida back to Europe. This movement across distinct regions is called repositioning, or one-way cruises. And yes, cruise lines have long realized that they can monetize off of these one-way routes. Because repositioning only happens a few times a year, these one-way itineraries aren't that common and therefore go unnoticed by the casual cruiser. However, repositioning cruises are among the cheapest options out there and therefore a fan favorite among savvy and budget-conscious travelers. So how cheap are repositioning cruises relative to standard round-trip cruises? Well, let's take the following as an example. The Discovery Princess is sailing from April 26th to the April 30th in 2025, and this is a one-way repositioning cruise from Los Angeles to Vancouver. With a cabin type of inside cabin, 3 guests, the base fare plus taxes, without gratuities, only amounts to $821, which comes out to $68 per person per night, an incredible deal. If instead you go on the Discovery Princess from May 18th to May 25th, and this would be a 7-night cruise in Alaska, for the same number of guests, this would cost for an inside cabin $4,015, which is almost $200 per person per night, and that's 179% more expensive. Another repositioning cruise, same route, Los Angeles to Vancouver, occurs next year in April in 2026, and it's on the Norwegian Bliss. If you book an inside cabin, again, 3 guests, base fare plus taxes would be about $1,300, and that amounts to $88 per person per night. An incredible deal, especially since the Norwegian Bliss is a relatively new ship. But if you contrast this instead with a 7-night Seattle round trip, so not a repositioning cruise, same ship, inside cabin, for the same number of guests, the base fare plus taxes is almost $2,500, amounting to $119 per person per night, and that's 35% more expensive on a per night per person basis than the previous cruise mentioned, the one-way repositioning cruise from LA to Vancouver. So, natural question is, why are these cruises so cheap?
First, these cruises typically pass through large bodies of water, so the opportunities for onshore excursions, while they do exist, tend to be more limited, which means there are a greater number of days on sea. This lack of onshore excursions is a turn-off to many cruise goers, especially for itineraries that are over a week long. Second, the one-way nature of these itineraries make travel logistics more difficult. For example, it's harder for someone to drive to an embarkation port when the disembarkation port may be located hundreds, if not thousands of miles from where you park your car. And then third, because there are no onshore excursions, the ship will naturally be more crowded during the day, and that puts a strain on common areas like the spa, fitness centers, pools, and dining rooms during lunchtime. And some people just don't like that. Repositioning cruises also tend to be longer itineraries, so if you're the type who prefers cruises that are under 7 days, then it's just harder to find these itineraries.
In fact, I noticed that the most popular one-way routes tend to be transatlantic or transpacific, and transatlantic routes are typically 10 to 14 days between Europe and North America. Transpacific one-way routes go between Alaska and Japan via the North Pacific or Australia or South Pacific to North America. And that's just a long distance, so it can take a couple of weeks. But if you're sold and you think that the repositioning cruise is the type of cruise for you, there are a couple options on how you can book. You can either use an aggregator site like repositioningcruise.com or vacations2go.com, or you can visit a specific cruise line website and filter on repositioning cruises. For example, here are 2 examples of one-way cruises from Celebrity's website, and these 2 are from Norwegian Cruise Line's website. Regardless of where you book these cruises, these one-way cruises typically follow the same cancellation policies as a standard round-trip cruise. So there you have it. That's the introduction to the repositioning cruise. Hope that this is helpful for all you budget travelers out there.